Hello and welcome to another episode of Parker's Previews powered by the Hammer. This is a show where I'm going to use advanced stats, data analytics to kind of talk through some of the more interesting matchups in college football to make sure that we can be better consumers of college football content and smarter investors as we approach these games. Got a good slate of games this week, doing pretty well this season, really enjoying kind of these deeper dives and have been making some money if you've been following along. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Got some great videos on there as well. And if you want to hear this in audio form, of course, you can get this anywhere that you get podcasts. Just search Parker's Previews. Today, we're going to kick off this week with another Big 12 matchup, kind of going to the well here. I like betting Kansas State. I think that Chris Klieman historically has made money really, really well. And I think that this is a good situation to kind of fade Iowa State situationally, and to bet on Kansas State. So Kansas State is going to be my official play here. I think you can get it at 2. Most places see it at 2.5 at one or two places, but -2 is great value, I think, for Kansas State here. This opened at 2, has not really moved. The under has not really moved at all. Started at 45.5 and is now 45. 77% of the bets are on Kansas State, 96% of the money. So those Iowa State backers are not really buying it so far. This season, I think Kansas State and Iowa State is a tale of two teams. Kansas State, obviously 4-1, big win over Oklahoma. A game against Texas Tech where they pulled out this past week and got ahead and maybe didn't play as well as they wanted to. Coupled with, a loss to Tulane that kind of seems like it was a sacrifice so that they could prepare it for and eventually beat Oklahoma. Iowa State, on the other hand, is 3-2 this season in multiple games that they should have won. I know should have won is a really big question or a really big statement to make, but overall, Iowa State has been in a couple close games against Kansas this weekend. They, kicked 3 field goals and missed 3 of those. They really had a chance, at the end of the game to put the ball in their quarterback's hands and win the game. So even though they kind of got the bug off their back with the Iowa win, they've really only beaten a bad Ohio team and Southeast Missouri State and one of the worst Iowa offenses maybe in history in a downpour. So the Iowa State defense against Kansas was pretty good. They were able to contain Jalen Daniels, but this offense just couldn't do absolutely anything to save their lives. Really aggressive on fourth downs, but they didn't finish drives very well at all. They averaged 6.0 yards per pass, 0.9 yards per rush, and had 2 turnovers. Just absolutely shot themselves in the foot. So I think they're scrambling a little bit. Looks like their running back room is going to be pretty thin as well this weekend. Jirel Brock is questionable, if not doubtful. And so we've just got a really nice situation here where Iowa State has had a couple deflating losses. They're trending downwards in the power rankings, and Kansas State is really looking, like they are playing that like the team that we thought they were going to be. So let's look at some of these specifics here. I give this about a 60% win probability to Kansas State, 40%, I guess, if you round up like I did there, 40% to Iowa State. Almost 32 projected points for Kansas State in the about 28 for Iowa State. So I think Iowa State will score some here. If Brock is out, I definitely would adjust that downward, but I think if you can still get this at 2 before that news gets totally broken, I think you'll only benefit if that news does get broken. So Kansas State, I have at 53rd in EPA per play margin. Iowa State at 67th. Kansas State's offense is 76th. And their defense is 33rd. Iowa State's offense is 90th, and their defense is 38th. So both teams kind of trend more towards the defensive side of things. I think Kansas State has had a couple games where they just haven't looked good, and then they've had that Oklahoma game where they looked amazing and looked like world beaters. So I think that their offense is a little bit better than the power ratings are showing. In terms of net points per drive, they're both in the 30s. The difference is that Kansas State at 35th in the nation, is scoring a little bit more than Iowa State, who's at 31st in the nation. Iowa State is 79th in net points per drive on offense. They're 12th in net points per drive on defense. Kansas State is 58th in net points per drive on offense, 21st in net points per drive on defense. So a little bit of balance there. Both pretty good in net field position, although I will say special teams, especially the kicking game, has really, really hurt Iowa State. And a little bit of a difference. Kansas State has been running the ball a whole lot, 113th in rush rate over expected, 67.2%, and Iowa State 17th in rush rate over expected. They've been passing a whole lot. So kind of a difference here in how these teams are going to approach this game, and I think a pretty fun matchup. So before we get into the specifics of the offense versus defense matchups, let's kind of look at the strength, and then we can talk about some players on both sides. So Kansas State 112th in EPA per pass. Again, that's some negative plays, some turnovers, but their success rate is not, is a little bit better at 91st than that 112th EPA per pass. They're 23rd in EPA per rush. So again, a very big split there. Looks like they're really only passing in kind of obvious passing situations. Of course, their rushing efficiency gets a boost because all of Adrian Martinez's scrambles are going to be counted as rushes. Iowa State's defense really good against the pass, 23rd, 64th against the rush. Remember, when we see a big split, we tend to think, I think teams are rushing the ball pretty well against Iowa State, and the pass defense is benefiting from teams only passing in obvious passing situations. So a benefit there because Kansas State is a little bit weaker on the passing side of things. Iowa State is allowing quality possession on just 31% of their drives. Kansas State is getting one on 46% of their drives, but Kansas State very, very explosive. The Wildcats are averaging 5 points per quality possession, and Iowa State allowing just under 4. That's 36th in the nation compared to 38th in the nation. So Kansas State has benefited a ton from field position. When we look at those drive efficiency numbers, we want to think about how well your opportunities start. Iowa State, here's where we see some of the issues with field position. They're 80th in starting field position allowed. 30.1 yard line is where teams are averaging starting. Kansas State is averaging starting on its own 33. So quite the split there. Iowa State also has a pretty big deficiency on early downs in terms of EPA. They're allowing 0.064 EPA per play on first and second downs. Kansas State is averaging 0.073, which is 54th in the nation. Compared to that 94th in the nation for Iowa State there. So Kansas State, with their explosive potential, should be able to do really, really, really well on early downs. Kansas State is really, really, really weighted down in their third and fourth down success rate because of the way that they played the Tulane game. I think they were 3 for 15, just an absurd bad game. And so that's still kind of weighting in to how they're doing. I think they're much better than their aggregate numbers show. Iowa State, of course, top 40, 35% allowed on third and fourth down success compared to 34% gained on third and fourth down success for Kansas State there. So kind of a split between the two. Kansas State brought in, to replace Skylar Thompson, brought in Adrian Martinez, and he's played pretty well. If we look at his passing, he's completing 62.8% of his passes. But if you look at the game by game, he's 61.8 against Oklahoma, 65.0 against Texas Tech, 67 against Tulane, and 45% against Missouri. So he's kind of weighed down by that earlier season game where maybe the offense wasn't gelling exactly like they wanted, even as they won a lot. You remember Chris Kleiman was talking about, hey, we have some issues. I don't know if the pass game is going to go like we want it to go. But, average depth of target is 7.4, adjusted completion percentage of almost 75%. Only 3 turnover-worthy plays all season, which for Adrian Martinez and kind of how he looked in that offense last year is really good. The other thing that I think will be really important here is pressure. Adrian Martinez has been under pressure on 41.1% of his dropbacks, but his completion percentage is 45.2%. So you couple that with his scrambles, I think he's doing a pretty good job. His sack to pressure rate is 12.1. He scrambled 9 times on the 58 dropbacks that he's been pressured on. So able to kind of move, get out of the pocket, maybe avoid taking those negative plays, and give Kansas State another chance to be explosive. Of course, we can't talk about Kansas State without talking about just, the most explosive weapon in college football in Deuce Vaughn. As a rusher, Deuce Vaughn is averaging 5.9 yards per attempt. He has 3 touchdowns, 2.49 yards after contact, 18 missed tackles forced, a long run of 70 yards, 18 runs of 10 plus yards. Adrian Martinez himself has 14 runs of 10 plus yards. So super explosive rushing. We look at, Iowa State's rush defense as kind of their weakness this season. In terms of explosiveness and EPA per play, that bodes well for what Kansas State wants to do. I think they'll be a little more dimensional than Kansas on offense. And Adrian Martinez, I think, has a little bit more versatility to kind of challenge this Iowa State defense. On the other side of things, Iowa State has really, really struggled to rush the ball. I have them at 106th in EPA per rush. This is mostly an artifact of, they lost. I joke that it's the get out of third down free card in having Breece Hall and the Brock Purdy to Charlie Kolar connection on your team. Iowa State's really having to figure out what they can do on early downs to get explosiveness while also maintaining their way to extending drives with what's on their roster. So Brock has been fine, 5.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 2 fumbles, a little worrisome, but 3.29 yards after contact, a long of 61, 10 runs of 10 plus yards. So he's been pretty good. He has 65 snaps. Then they've kind of spread it out among, a couple guys behind him, but not a lot of depth in the passing there for that attack that's 106th in the nation, or the rushing that's 106th in the nation. EPA per pass is 72nd. I think it's really important to look at their target share. Xavier Hutchinson has 71 targets. Jalen Noel is their next closest guy. He's got 31. The bottom falls out really quickly. There's not a lot of depth. It's also very weird to see that they don't have a true tight end, that Jared Russ is more of a blocker, less of a passing threat. So they're having to figure out, how to play with 4 wide receivers and a running back in the pass game. And Hunter Deckers, the quarterback, really goes to Xavier Hutchinson a lot. So looking at his passing, 69.3% completion, 7.0 yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, though, 7 turnover-worthy plays, average depth of target of 6.8. He's playing like a first-year quarterback. I think this Kansas State defense is really going to give him fits. They are 25th in EPA per pass, 50th in EPA per rush. Passing success rate, Kansas State's defense is 21st allowed. So between their 2 dominant edge rushers and their 2 cornerbacks, I think this matchup really just speaks that Kansas State's going to be able to score consistently, have that high explosive ceiling, and they're really going to be able to frustrate Iowa State in the things that Iowa State wants to do. 36.0 quality possession rate for Kansas State is 17th in the nation on defense. Iowa State is 60th in the nation on offense, 47.7%. So a couple of things here that really stand out that make me like this matchup of Kansas State -2. You have one, Kansas State's explosive run ceiling with Adrian Martinez and Deuce Vaughn against Iowa State's rushing defense that is 38.8% success rate allowed and 0.01 EPA per rush allowed. That's 54th and 64th in the nation against some not very good offenses. So I think Kansas State's rushing attack will give Iowa State a lot of fits. And I think that on the flip side, Iowa State really has struggled to run the ball this season. If Brock is out, that really makes things thin. I think I even saw that they were looking at putting a wide receiver at running back. So some real issues there for Iowa State, and they really rely on the pass game being, so high in rush rate over expected. With Kansas State's pass defense this year has been really, really good, 25th in EPA per play. I think that's really what's going to determine this matchup, is that Iowa State really doesn't have a lot of options to move the ball against a pretty good defense here. So this has been video 1 of 3 this week on Parker's previews. Just taking an analytical deep dive into stats and numbers behind a matchup, why we might bet a certain way if we want to bet a certain way here. I hope that I've convinced you that that Kansas State plus or -2 is a pretty good bargain here. I like the value, and I think that the Wildcats should come away with a win and a cover on the road. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at StatsOfWar. I'll be posting these graphs that you see right here and all sorts of charts and commentary throughout the week. I'll be back again tomorrow and Friday with 2 more videos. Thanks for tuning in.